Assalamualaikum, my name is Arfat and welcome to a brand new video. Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to share with you some of the introduction to the New Testament textbook that I have at my disposal. And I've certainly not read every introduction to the New Testament out there in the market, and I've certainly not read cover to cover when it comes to those books that I own. When it comes to introduction to the New Testament, and I use this work as reference, in particular because I'm very interested to know what multiple scholars say about the book of James, for example, about the Gospels, for example. And so I do not just depend on what one scholar say. I do not just depend on what one. I do not just depend on one introduction to the New Testament. Um, I want to know what evangelical scholars say. I want to know what they write, and I also want to know at the end of the spectrum what like atheist Christian scholars, atheist New Testament scholars say about the book of the New Testament. And I also want to know how the New Testament has been interpreted from a theological perspective, from a socio-historical perspective, even as far as from a feministic perspective. And so this is something that I enjoy, and I've been pretty much devoting the past decade also in actually trying to know and trying to learn by the day. It takes time to survey a lot of literatures, and so it takes time. And so I've been wanting to do this video for quite a while now, and so this is I'm doing it today. I'll be showing you the introduction to the New Testament textbook that I have, in no particular order. That means that the books that I show you first doesn't mean that it is the best, so in no particular order, because I do not want to present any biases in this video. But I will tell you which is the which introduction to the New Testament textbook I think is I changed my mind. I will present three different categories, from like beginner to like intermediate and to advanced. And I'll pick which books are actually good and why they fall into that category also. And so in no particular order, I'll just present you all the books, and then I'll come back and give you the three different categories. So I guess that if you have no knowledge at all about the New Testament, and if you look at all these literatures out there when it comes to the textbook dealing with introduction to the New Testament, you soon realize that almost majority of these books are very thick. Okay, they're super thick, they're super long, they're above 500, 600, 700 pages, 800 pages even, and it will overwhelm you easily. Okay, and so you want to take it step by step, and you want to start with the thinnest book first, that just gives you a general survey of the different 27 books in the New Testament. And then you slowly want to start looking into the books that have not make it into the New Testament but have been used by the early Christians. And then you slowly want to get into all these different other literatures, which is called the Apocrypha. And so I guess we will start with the Oxford, a very short introduction to the New Testament. This is a fantastic survey written by Luke Timothy Johnson. It gives you photographs as well, but you can't expect much from a book that is about 150 pages long. Less than that, actually. About 120 pages long. And so, but this is a fantastic place to start. because it gives you the different 27 books, and it explains to you briefly what these books are, the content of this book. And so this is something that I would definitely point new readers or people that are just starting out um, into this field, and they want to know what scholars, academics say about the New Testament. Excuse me, I'm sorry if my voice sounds old, archaic, because I'm still unwell. And so, in no particular order, the next one is the Cambridge Companion to the New Testament. Again, you can see the different the contrast in the number of pages here. The Cambridge Companion to the New Testament. This is something fantastic. It is not written by just one scholar. It is written by a bunch of scholars, scholars that are great in their own particular field. Like for example, we have scholars for that is great in Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, the Synoptic Gospels. In Paul, for example, different books of Paul. And so each of these scholars have contributed, and there are more than 10 scholars here, and edited by Patrick Gray. This is Cambridge Companion to the New Testament by Cambridge University Press. This will give you a much in-depth survey, comparing it to the Oxford Companion, the Oxford very short introduction. And this is also a great survey, this book, to know, because it is not written just by one scholar. It is written by a group of scholars. Even though it is edited, the editor has the final say or whatsoever, but I would say majority of the materials are actually not coming from one theological bias, because everyone has their own theological bias, okay, even if they are atheists. Okay, and if you read a lot of literatures from different people of different faith, you start to realize that a Jewish scholar writing about Jesus will always want to make Jesus a Jew, whereas evangelical fundamental scholar writing about Jesus will always want to make Jesus portray more towards the triune God. It's very rare that in all the literatures that I've read, whereby the theological biases do not actually creep here and there in the works of scholars. I can count less than two hands, so in less than 10 fingers, in all the literatures that I've read, whereby the work is about more than 90% neutral. Okay. And one of the scholars that I respected the most when it comes to 90% neutrality, definitely at the top of my mind right now, is James D. Tabor. Okay, James Tabor, very very neutral guy. Although I disagree with some of his interpretation, because I found opinion from other scholars more convincing, but at the top of my head, he is the most neutral when it comes to all this. He doesn't let his theological biases creep through that much. And so this is the second book. The next one is the New Testament. Its background, its background, growth, and content. This is by the late Professor Bruce Metzger. This gives you a summary of the life of Jesus, like the Greco-Roman world and things like that. We have the book of Revelation, we have the writings of Paul, and so there's a lot of fantastic work here. The New Testament is background, growth, and content. This is by Abingdon Press. This is the third edition. This is the revised edition. This is the final edition. I don't think there's a fourth edition. There's also photographs in here. It's not plate. It's just printed on using the same paper. It's not any special paper that you found on like plates, for example. Something different. Introduction to the New Testament by Raymond F. Collins. This is not a work whereby for new beginners at all, because this actually looks at the books of the New Testament and using different historical methods like form criticism, a lot of others, different. I can't even think right now. A lot of different methods that scholars use to interpret the text. Historical criticism, narrative criticism, form criticism, thematic approach, and all those different. And so this is not for beginner at all. If a beginner were to pick this up and then read, they'll probably be demoralized and demotivated. This is more for advanced student, because it goes through tons of historical critical method when it comes to studying the New Testament. And so this is published by Doubleday, Image, by a great Professor Raymond F. Collins. This is I think this is in the 70s. Let me just double check here. This is 1983. Yeah, 1983. No, 1978. The first print. Yeah, 1978. And so I like to survey like all works as well. And there's one more work actually, quite old. Forgive me, guys. I forgot about this work. I've made reviews about this work before, but the next one is Introduction to the New Testament for Catholics. Again, this goes through with you the different Gospels, the different books within the New Testament, and Joseph F. Kelly is a great church historian, and he has produced tons of other work as well. This is 1986. Yeah, this is 1986. No, sorry, my mistake. Doesn't really actually put the year. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And so again, this is for Catholics, and so I survey works that is because majority of the works that I have here, Introduction to the New Testament, I've mentioned this in my previous videos, whereby a lot of these works were actually written towards a Protestant audience, because that is what the dominance in the academic field is. But it is great to have something that shed a new light, shed a new perspective that is from a different background. So Introduction to the New Testament for Catholics, it is about 200 plus pages long, and so it's about 260 pages long also. And all of the books that I would recommend you when it comes to an Introduction to the New Testament are by highly acclaimed, reputable scholars within their own theological camp. Okay, and I will not recommend you any work, even though I read some of these works, but I will not recommend you any works that is not written by scholars and have not gone through the vetting process, okay, so that we maintain our academic integrity and our academic rigor, at least when it comes to the literature that we use. This one has images as well, not plates, scattered throughout. And so this is also something good if you want to, have some visuals and not just plain text all the way through. Let me just show you. For example, here I wish it is colored, but then again that would increase the costing. Next one is by one of the great New Testament scholar, retired Professor Dale B. Martin. Now, this is a really fantastic read. I remember I couldn't put this book down when I read it years back, and I was following through his course on YouTube as well. I would read the literature first, as he recommend. Like, I would read the literature first, and then I would take his class, on YouTube, available on YouTube, and you should check it out as well. And this is a great survey. The book says a lot more compared to his lecture, but he wrote this book after he gave the series, and so he has time to edit and add more information as well. And so if you've taken the course on YouTube, definitely go and get this book. Again, I am not affiliated with any publications, and I do not want to be affiliated with any one. I get approach, but I always do not want anything to do with this. And so again, Dale Martin. This is published by University Press, New Testament History and Literature. The next one, we move to some hard stuff here. Okay, a very distinguished, respected scholar, David DeSilva. An 800-page masterpiece, something that is fantastic. This book is one of the great introduction to the New Testament book that has been published. Even though I do not agree with a lot of what the materials inside here, well, I would say maybe I agree 70%, but 30% I don't agree. And this one is written for like ministry. It has this ministry. The direction is for like pastors and ministers to use, and because it contains like what should you preach to your congregation about this, what should when it is catered to, it is very difficult for me to say. It is written with some ministry thing in mind. Okay, I guess that's the way to best to put it. This is the second edition. Yeah, the second edition is, from what I know, it has been updated a lot. Information have been updated, and this is a fantastic work. It has a lot of these boxes, and so it is a very useful resource if you want to teach, or if you just want to research on your own. So it even has this, for example, if you if you start on a fresh chapter, you will get like a, let me just turn to the fresh chapter here. You get like an overview of what the chapter, the book is about. So it is a very useful thing for you. Say, for example, an outline of John's Gospel here. Hopefully you can see it. I'm using the rear of the camera on my iPhone, so hopefully I can't see what I'm filming, but hopefully it's all good. Yeah, so the text is just long and and it looks boring, but believe me, I use this as a resource, and even though I know that the author is like somewhat evangelical, but he's pretty much mainstream in some of his thoughts. He argues that Second Thessalonian was actually written by Paul, and he gave the evidence whereby it is more convincing that way. So again, I don't agree with him because some of his arguments have been refuted by scholars from other introductory textbook that I am using. But it is always important to open your mind and read what even the people that you disagree with. You have to give them the due respect before you even disagree with them. How can you? A lot of people, I realize that they disagree with someone just because that someone is evangelical or something like that, without even reading what they write. And so I think that is not a fair thing to do, especially in the academic. If you are being academic, if your approach is strictly academic, you have to at least read the materials that they write. You can't just disagree with someone just because they're known to be evangelical, or they're known to be for the most part. If you actually survey the books that I have behind me, 80% of them were actually written by Christians and Jews who actually believe in their religion. Yeah. And so I read what those people say, and even though I'm a Muslim, but I don't disagree with people simply because they have a different theological views as compared to me. I think that is the most unfair thing that you can do. Next one is Mark Allen Powell, introducing the New Testament. Okay. Introducing the New Testament. What's the subtitle? A historical, literary, and theological survey. Again, this book receives a lot of reviews, good reviews, and this book is a fantastic book. Even though I disagree with the author, also try to argue that Second Thessalonians is actually written by Paul. Even though I disagree, but you have to read, and you have to have great evidence to disagree with the scholars. It has pictures, it has boxes as well. Again, a great resource. You even have chronology. So this is something, definitely you even have like some theological boxes here and there. You get you get what you pay for. And this is by Baker Academic. Again, introducing the New Testament. Next one, another evangelical work, N.T. Wright and Michael Bird. Even though I disagree with very much what they say, but I do have my notes, and I actually learn a lot from them. Again, they try to argue about the Second Thessalonians, or the quote unquote other than the 7 undisputed letters of Paul. Again, it contains chronology. Some of these textbook actually starts with the letters of Paul, and I think that is actually a great way to start, because Paul is our earliest sources. Okay. And so again, 800 pages. I learned a lot about the life of Paul from this work, And I think the life of Paul has not been written as clearly as it has in other than in here, in the materials that I've surveyed. And so even though the life of Paul, when it comes to the book order that these two authors have chosen, like some people put Galatians first and then Philippians, or Philippians first and Galatians, and so these are just some technical problems which people like me are very interested in, which is why I have a lot of this material. But for the most part, it doesn't actually make a difference when it comes to what is Paul's view of Jesus, what is like the general chronology of Paul, if you compare it to Acts and the undisputed letters of Paul, and how much should you accept Acts, the book of Acts, and how much should you accept Paul? Whenever you find a discrepancy in the account written by Acts and written by Paul, who do you follow? Do you follow Paul or do you follow Acts? Some scholars actually argue to follow Acts, which I think they're completely wrong, because a lot of the materials here say follow Paul. But what about the Gospels then? What about the Gospels who portray Jesus differently than what Paul portrays, even though Mark has been influenced by Paul? But what about the Q sources then? And so this is something really interesting, and which is why I have a lot of different books to know what different scholars say. Another evangelical work, this is by Zondervan Academic, Introduction to the New Testament, D.A. Carson and Douglas Moo. Am I correct? Yeah, D.J. Carson and Douglas Moo. Again, they're great work. They're great scholars. Some of these scholars have written commentaries, and it's not easy to write commentaries, albeit theological commentaries or historical commentaries. You do need to actually sit in a room, shut your family out, and just surround yourself with literatures, and then write a commentary. And that is what a lot of these scholars do, which is why you should respect them even though you disagree with them. And one of the ways, if you are doing the academic way, is to actually read what they write, and don't just refute them because you disagree with their theology. That doesn't make sense to me. So you even have tables here, and a lot of I like tables, especially especially when I want to make videos. Some chapters are very long, like 40 pages, and so you at least need we'll get to Raymond Brown, but you start to realize that Raymond Brown wrote a chapter that is 50 page long. And so before I make a video, I mean it would take me about 2 or 3 hours to read 50 page. And so that's a very long time, and so I don't have that unless on the weekend. But a table like this will help, because it reminds me of what this chapter is, because it is impossible for me to remember every single thing that I read. And so which is why tables will help. Okay? And you'll not get a lot of tables from thin books like this, but you'll get a lot of tables once you start getting into like huge literatures like this. And so Zondervan Academic, An Introduction to the New Testament. Right. Another book that looks at things also from a theological perspective. This is by Westminster John Knox Press. Yeah, a lot of all the books here I'm showing you published by reputable publishers. Okay, and they have gone through vetting. Eugene Boring, if for those of you who do not know Eugene Boring, he is a great New Testament scholar, and he is also text critic. He works with Professor Bruce Metzger, and again, 700 pages of masterpiece. Okay, 600 plus pages of masterpiece, and it goes through textual criticism in here. It talks about different criticism, the different historical method, and there's a lot of great, fantastic reviews. Yeah, fantastic reviews. And so again, I'll be repeating myself time and time again, because it is very important for one who is very interested to survey in all of these materials. He even talks about Q in here. This is a great resource. So Eugene Boring, An Introduction to the New Testament, his History, Literature and Theology. So this is second edition. Let me just see if this is second edition. Nope, it's the first edition, 2012. Alright, we've down to a few, but the next one, the Bible. Okay, this contains the Old Testament as well, but it also contains the New Testament. So this is a very quick survey. This is for like 1 semester course. If you are someone who wants to actually learn the entire book of the Bible, every single book of the Bible is covered here. The Protestant canon, 66 books. Every single book is covered here. This is by Professor Ehrman. This is the second edition. This is published by Oxford University Press. Spend 6 months studying this book, make notes like this, and you within 6 months. But obviously, before you actually study the different chapter here, you have to read the book in the Bible first. So within 6 months, you need to read 66 books of the Bible. It's about 2,000 pages long, also in the NRSV. But you can even use other translation, but I would not recommend the King James, the New King James. I would not recommend. Use the RSV or the NRSV. You can even use the NIV. I use the NIV as well sometimes. But yeah, if you want to know the entire book of the Bible, you can read this. Again, you have maps, you have photographs, okay, and the paper is the nicest feeling paper out of all the other books. Okay. The best paper that I have in my entire quote-unquote library. Yeah. But these do comes at a very high price. Expect to pay about 150 USD for this. I've seen some online shop selling this for about 180. I got mine for about 120. So you have a lot of these photographs. It's not plate based, but I just like the surface of the book. Like you have maps here. The paper just feels nice. And if you are familiar with my video, you know that I like ancient papers. So I like paper. Focusing on Professor Ehrman's work when it comes to Introduction to the New Testament, this is the 5th edition of the brief Introduction to the New Testament. It contains only 27 books in the New Testament. Only 27 books of the New Testament is being discussed here. I've reviewed this, as well as The complete version, which is this one, I've reviewed this I think a lot of times in my channel, so I do not need to review them again. I've recommended them multiple times. This used to be my favorite introduction to the New Testament, and I read this, literally read. I've read cover to cover, except for the chapter on Jesus. And I've read this cover to cover. Some chapters I've read more than 10 times. And so this is still this used to be my go-to reference for the longest of time. I have the first edition, by the way, not in book format. I have the PDF of the first edition, and so this is the 7th edition. And so if you look at it from a whole, this is the most used, not necessarily this edition, the most used introduction to the New Testament. And I rely a lot of I learned a lot in my earlier days of learning this craft, this field. And if I can owe it to one book, I'll owe it to Professor Ehrman's Introduction to the New Testament. But I've since moved on, because you can't stick to one author for so long, and so for now my reference is another book that I wish I had discovered earlier, but Burkett's Introduction to the New Testament. Introduction to the New Testament and the Origins of Christianity. This is by Cambridge University Press. This is the most underrated work when it comes to Introduction to the New Testament. Okay. In all the New Testaments that I've surveyed, the Introduction to the New Testament that I've surveyed up to this point, and I think this is the most underrated. Not a lot of people know about this work by Burkett. This is the 2nd edition, by the way. But if you just want to teach someone about the New Testament, I think there is no better book to use than this one, in my opinion. In the books that I've surveyed, that I've just presented to you, I think this is the best. It is not written in a very, very highly complicated language. It is not written at a very high level, and it is also not written at a very low level. And I think this fits perfectly in the middle. Out of the literatures that I've just surveyed, this fits perfectly in the middle. And previously, when I tried to teach my friends and even making videos, I would always turn to Professor Ehrman's work. I would read chapter again and again and again, because there's no point form in here. There's no point form in here. It gives you a survey what the book of John is about, for example. But it doesn't give you what is this, because this book is written from a thematic approach, from a historical approach, using different historical methods to understand the community behind, for example, the Johannine epistle, for example. And so this is a unique work in a sense. It is different from a lot of the other introduction to the New Testament. But Burkett's work I like because it contains the point form, and it is clearly indicated, and it is even boldened, for example. So this is something I find useful, and the author is actually very talented, and he uses less words to put his point across. So you don't have to read like entire sentence and then you get what the author is saying. No, he uses lesser words to get his points across, and I like that. I do not like to read for so long, and then at the end of the day, like, first of all, you if you want to tell a message, you just want to tell it and do it successfully, whereby the readers get to know actually what you want to say. Like for example, speak your mind out completely, and do that within a few sentences. And that is, I like reading those kind of authors, and so I enjoy Delbert Burkett's prose, and a very talented and unfortunately very underrated scholar and book as well. This is by Cambridge University Press. So last but not least, I turn to Professor Brown, the late Professor Raymond Brown. He is just super talented. He was a Roman Catholic priest. He passed away a year after finishing after this book get printed. So there's only one edition. The other edition is the abridged edition, which he worked with his student for the original for the original work. If you are just someone starting out, if you have to either get this one by Oxford, okay, the New Testament, a very short introduction, or get Brown's work, I would say just pay the extra $20 and go for Brown's, because Brown, his work is fantastic, especially when it comes to tables. I like tables. I wish a lot of scholars would actually include tables in their work, but I understand, because I'm a writer also, and it is actually quite tedious to prepare the table, and some scholars actually pay someone to actually do the tables, but nevertheless it is always nice to have tables and maps. So what can I say? I've said million things about this in a lot of my videos. I've made reviews about this book before. You can check it out. But yeah, so wish he would have been able to stay alive. I mean, that's not possible. But someone who actually updates the information, because this was written about more than 2 decades ago, and some of the informations have not been updated, but the scholarships have moved somewhat away from this. And Brown also is leading more towards Second Thessalonians being written by Paul, even though he categorized that under disputed Pauline epistles. But if you actually read the chapter on Second Thessalonians, he suggests that he questioned actually, in light of the evidence that he has at his time, it is about 60-40 that it is actually not written by Paul. But if he were to if he is alive today, and he looks at the argument that scholars have since advanced as to why Second Thessalonians is definitely not written by Paul, he would have changed his mind, and the odds would be about 80-20. Second Thessalonians is not written by Paul. But anyway, so where do I categorize this? Okay, obviously the beginner one is very easy. I would still recommend this one. Okay, for like extreme beginner. We're talking about you have zero knowledge. Okay, this now people would say that you should only recommend this if that someone is actually going to study the New Testament from an academic approach. Okay, meaning using historical method and not from a faith devotional perspective. Well, that is true. I would not recommend like confessional books because I don't believe in the New Testament to be the Word of God, and my approach is strictly academic. I want to know what the New Testament scholars say about the New Testament, and and when it comes to faith devotional, you can make all sorts of claim, and you don't really need to back it up by physical tangible evidence. And so I want something that is more rigor, something that is more based on, like, you have data and things like that. So which is why I adopt the historical method, because I have no problem with that. And I have no problem with people applying historical methods to the Quran as well, to the Hadiths, because at the end of the day, faith and faith and your academic methods or whatever it is, it doesn't affect. It shouldn't affect, because if you believe in God, and if you believe in, or you don't even believe in God, we can all come to common terms using historical method. Because if you were to come out with your faith, you say this, you say that, and I say this, and some other people say that, and how can we sit down at a round table and discuss about the New Testament from, let's say, if someone's Hindu, someone's a Muslim, someone's a Jew, someone's a Zoroastrian, so how do we discuss this then if we were to use faith? Because everyone has a different faith. And so, which is why we adopt the historical method, because that is something that we can come to common terms with, and something that we can actually apply and test, in a sense, using the sources that we have. So the New Testament, this is my recommendation, a very short introduction. Mid-level book, Burkett. Burkett's work I would recommend. Introduction to the New Testament and the Origins of Christianity. This is something that I would actually, I don't mind reading again and again and again. It is just nicely written. It is not too long as well. And out of the works that I have here, that is very advanced, is definitely Raymond Brown. This guy is a master of the Hebrew Bible as well, and so he draws on a lot of parallels. He knows what the author of the Gospels were actually using, the sources that he has. And like I said, I wish that the information would have been updated, but again, that's not possible because he's passed away. So now, which is my favorite? In the past, I know I've made videos mentioning that this is my favorite, the one written by Professor Ehrman, and I've also mentioned that this is my favorite. But my ultimate favorite is the one by Burkett. And I highly recommend, even if you have knowledge, if you want to study more advanced, then maybe this is not for you. But if you are just someone that has been attending Sunday schools or whatsoever, and you want something that is more academic, meaning you already by this stage you already have knowledge about what the different books of the Bible is, from the Old Testament and the New Testament, and you just want to know what academic scholars are saying using the historical method, and how you want to read your books in the New Testament from a different perspective. This is the one, and this is my favorite out of all the literatures that I've surveyed. When it comes to Introduction to the New Testament, this is my favorite by Burkett. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sticking out. And if I would recommend against buying either one of these, any one of this literature, I would not make such videos, because what I don't like, you might like. So I do not want to say negative things about any. I respect all scholars, be it all walks of, and be it all theological background that they have, or whatever their faith are. It doesn't matter to me. I read their works. I will still continue to read their works even though I disagree with them, and the only reason I disagree with them is because that I found their argument not convincing, and some of their arguments are theologically motivated, even though the evidence is directly against them, but they still make that conclusion. Like, for example, a plus 1 plus 1 give you 2. That is like, the evidence is so strong, but they'll still go for 1 plus 1 give me 1. And so you find a lot of works, you find this in a lot of works, even within the New Testament books that I've surveyed. But you still have to respect what they write, and you still have to give it a chance and continue reading and let them finish what they want to say before you actually make a judgment. So I'm losing my voice. My name is Arfat, and I'll see you on my next video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.